My husband Miles abandoned me during labor to attend his business conference in Monaco, texting, "Some women handle this better than others," while I delivered our daughter alone, until the hospital administrator walked in with keys to a private jet and said, "Your grandmother's instructions were very specific about what to do if he wasn't here." The pregnancy test felt like holding lightning in my hands. Two perfect pink lines stared back at me from the small plastic window, bold and undeniable. After 3 years of trying, 3 years of disappointment and carefully timed hopes, this was finally happening. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I pressed my palm against my still flat stomach, imagining the tiny miracle growing inside me. My heart hammered against my ribs as I burst through the bathroom door of our Manhattan penthouse, the test clutched in my trembling fingers like a winning lottery ticket. The morning sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting everything in golden possibility. "Miles!" I called out, my voice cracking with pure joy. "Miles, you have to see this." He looked up from his laptop at the marble kitchen island, his perfectly styled dark hair catching the light. His expensive suit was already pristine at 7 a.m., Miles never did anything halfway. His eyes flicked to the test in my hands, then immediately back to his screen. "Okay," he said, his tone flat as if I'd just told him we were out of coffee. That's something." Something, the word hit me like ice water. My world had just shifted completely off its axis, and he called it something. I stood there in my silk pajamas, holding proof of the family we'd discussed for years, and watched him scroll through whatever was apparently more important on his laptop. "Aren't you excited?" I whispered, my voice barely audible in the vast space of our home. "Sure, babe. Just processing," he replied without looking up. "You know I've got the Singapore presentation today. Big client." That night, I lay awake planning our announcement. Maybe we could hire a photographer for one of those cute reveal photos with tiny baby shoes. Or perhaps a dinner party where we'd surprise both our families simultaneously. I imagined the squeals of delight from my sister Ellen, the congratulatory embraces, the immediate planning for baby showers and nursery colors. Sleep came fitfully, filled with dreams of tiny fingers and first steps, of Miles reading bedtime stories and teaching our child to ride a bike. Dreams that felt more vivid and real than his reaction had been. The first doctor's appointment arrived like Christmas morning in my mind. I'd taken the entire afternoon off from my marketing firm, bought a special leather-bound notebook to record everything Dr. Rodriguez would tell us, and even packed Miles's favorite energy bars knowing he got irritable when his blood sugar dropped. I'd sent him 3 reminder texts throughout the week. I'd put it in his digital calendar with alerts. I'd mentioned it over dinner just the night before. He never showed up. I sat in that sterile waiting room surrounded by glowing couples holding hands, checking my phone obsessively for his inevitable excuse. The text came at exactly our appointment time: emergency client call with Tokyo. "You'll be fine. Just get the basic info." Basic info. About our first child. Our miracle after years of trying. The nurse called my name, Eloise Garrett? And I walked into that examination room alone. Dr. Rodriguez smiled warmly as she squirted cold gel on my stomach, but her eyes kept darting to the empty chair beside me. "Where's Dad today?" she asked gently, her voice carrying the practiced neutrality of someone who'd seen this before. "Business emergency," I lied, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. "You know how it is." But I didn't know how it was. I didn't understand how a business call could matter more than hearing our baby's heartbeat for the first time. I didn't understand how he could miss this moment we dreamed about for 3 years. The heartbeat filled the room, fast, strong, determined. I stared at the grainy ultrasound image, trying to make out a nose or tiny fingers, and felt tears streaming down my cheeks. This was supposed to be our moment. Instead, I was sharing it with a kind stranger who handed me tissues and pretended not to notice the wedding ring on my finger that felt suddenly heavy and meaningless. "Everything looks perfect," Dr. Rodriguez said, printing out several ultrasound photos. "Baby's measuring right on track for 8 weeks. Heartbeat is strong and healthy." That evening, I showed Miles the ultrasound photos with shaking hands. He glanced at them for maybe 5 seconds before setting them on the kitchen counter next to junk mail and grocery store circulars. "Cool," he said, not looking up from his phone. "Looks like a little blob." "A blob? Our baby. Our miracle. A blob." The doctor said everything looks perfect, I offered, desperate for some connection, some sign that this mattered to him. "That's good," he replied absently, thumb scrolling through what I could see were work emails. "When's the next one?" 2 weeks. February 14th, actually. Valentine's Day. I'd thought that was romantic, poetic even. I might have something that day. The Monaco conference prep is intense right now. Monaco conference. I'd heard about it in passing, some luxury hospitality summit that his company attended annually. It was still months away, but apparently it was already more important than our Valentine's Day ultrasound. The second appointment came and went the same way. Then the third. Each time, Miles had a more elaborate excuse: client presentation in Chicago, emergency board meeting, traffic was impossible due to construction. I stopped asking him to come. The disappointment was becoming too heavy to carry, but the worst part was that I could see what genuine excitement looked like, because Miles showed it to everyone else. When his business partner Carlos announced his wife Camille's pregnancy, just 2 weeks after mine, Miles was the first to congratulate them. He bought them champagne, sent flowers, asked detailed questions about due dates and gender predictions. "That's incredible news," he'd exclaimed, embracing Carlos with genuine enthusiasm. "You guys are going to be amazing parents." I watched from across the restaurant table, my own pregnancy barely showing at 12 weeks, as my husband celebrated someone else's baby with the joy he'd never shown for ours. When Carlos mentioned their first ultrasound appointment, Miles immediately offered to adjust their business meeting schedule to accommodate it. "Family comes first," Miles had said, raising his glass in a toast. Nothing's more important than these moments. Nothing, apparently, except when it came to his own family. His own moments. His own wife, sitting right there, carrying his child, wondering what she'd done wrong to deserve such indifference to the miracle growing inside her. That night, I finally understood that the problem wasn't my timing, my approach, or my expectations. The problem was that Miles simply didn't care. The excuses became an art form. Miles had perfected the language of corporate urgency, wielding phrases like client emergency and board directive like shields against any inconvenient family obligations. By my 16th week, I'd learned to expect his absence rather than hope for his presence. "The Singapore expansion requires my full attention right now," he explained when I mentioned our upcoming anatomy scan, the appointment where we'd finally learn if we were having a boy or girl. "You understand how important this deal is for our future, right? For the baby's future?" He had a way of making his abandonment sound like sacrifice, his selfishness like strategy. "The Singapore deal would set us up financially," he claimed. "The Monaco conference would secure our long-term stability. Every missed appointment was an investment in our family's security, even though our family barely existed in his mind." Dr. Rodriguez had stopped asking about Miles after the fourth solo visit. Instead, she'd begun offering subtle accommodations. That spoke volumes about what she'd witnessed in her practice. "Would you like me to print extra copies of the ultrasound photos?" she'd ask gently. "Sometimes partners appreciate having their own set when they can't make it. Extra copies that would sit untouched on kitchen counters, buried under business documents and conference itineraries." The anatomy scan fell on a Thursday afternoon in March. I'd blocked out the entire day, knowing this appointment would be longer, more detailed. We'd finally see our baby's face clearly, count fingers and toes, learn whether to buy pink or blue. I'd even bought a small gift bag with "It's a" cards inside, planning to surprise Miles with the gender reveal when he came home. "Definitely can't make this one," he'd said over breakfast, not looking up from his phone. "Luis is flying in from Madrid specifically for our Monaco prep meeting. These international partnerships don't wait for convenient timing." Luis Mendoza was Miles's business partner, a charming Spaniard who'd built a hospitality empire across Europe. I'd met him several times at company events, always impeccably dressed, always charismatic, always treating me with the kind of warm attention that made Miles's coldness feel even more stark by comparison. "The anatomy scan is kind of a big deal," I said carefully, knowing that pushing too hard would only make him more defensive. "It's when we find out the sex." "I know what it is," he replied, finally looking up with mild irritation. "We'll celebrate when I get home. Maybe we can go to dinner or something." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Maybe. Even our celebrations were conditional, dependent on his schedule, his mood, his willingness to briefly acknowledge the life growing inside me. I drove to the appointment alone, again, parking in the medical center garage that had become as familiar as my office building. The waiting room was full of couples, as always, men holding their wives' hands, rubbing their backs, asking questions about the upcoming procedure with genuine concern and excitement. Eloise? The ultrasound technician, Sandra, had become my favorite member of Dr. Rodriguez's team. She was in her 50s with knowing eyes and gentle hands, the kind of woman who'd probably seen every variation of family dynamics in her 20-year career. "Flying solo again today?" she asked as I settled onto the examination table. Business meeting, I replied automatically, the excuse so practiced it felt scripted. Sandra nodded with understanding that felt more like pity. She squeezed the warm gel onto my rounded belly, now prominent enough that strangers had started offering me seats on the subway and asking about my due date with genuine excitement. "Let's see what baby's up to today," she said, moving the ultrasound wand across my skin. The familiar whooshing of the heartbeat filled the room, strong and steady. "Oh, look at that. Baby's being very cooperative today." The image on the screen was startlingly clear. I could see the profile, the delicate curve of the nose, tiny fingers pressed against a cheek. This was our baby, not a blob, not an inconvenience, but a real human being with expressions and personality already emerging. "Would you like to know the sex?" Sandra asked, pausing the wand over a particular area. "Yes," I whispered, tears already building. "Please." "Congratulations, Mama. You're having a little girl." "A girl. A daughter." I pictured tea parties and bedtime stories, teaching her to be strong and confident, showing her that she deserved to be celebrated and cherished. Everything I was struggling to remember about my own worth. Sandra printed out a dozen photos, more than usual. "These are beautiful images," she said, handing me the warm prints. "Dad's going to love seeing these." I nodded, knowing the photos would likely meet the same fate as all the others. A brief glance before being filed away with utility bills and takeout menus. The drive home gave me time to plan the reveal. I stopped at a boutique baby store and bought the tiniest pink dress I could find, soft as a whisper with delicate white embroidery around the collar. I arranged the ultrasound photos on our dining table with the dress, creating a small shrine to our daughter's first official portrait session. Miles arrived home at nearly 9 p.m., his tie loosened and his hair slightly disheveled from what he claimed was a 12-hour strategy session with Luis. "How'd it go?" he asked absently, dropping his briefcase and immediately reaching for his phone to check messages. "We're having a girl," I said, gesturing toward the dining table display. He glanced over, his expression neutral. "Cool. A girl." He picked up one of the ultrasound photos, studied it for perhaps 10 seconds, then set it down. "Did they say everything looks healthy?" "Perfect. She's perfect." "Good. That's good." He was already walking toward his home office, phone pressed to his ear. "Luis, sorry, just got home. What were you saying about the Monaco venue specifications?" I stood in our dining room, surrounded by evidence of our daughter's existence, listening to my husband prioritize conference logistics over meeting his child for the first time. The pink dress seemed to mock me with its innocence, a symbol of hope in a house where hope felt increasingly naive. That night, I carefully packed away the ultrasound photos and the little dress in a memory box I'd started keeping in our bedroom closet. Evidence of a pregnancy that apparently only mattered to me, documentation of moments that should have been shared but were experienced in solitude. The pattern was undeniable now. This wasn't about bad timing or work stress or temporary prioritization of career over family. This was about fundamental indifference, systematic dismissal of anything that required emotional investment in our future together. Family dinners at the Garrett estate became exercises in emotional survival. Every Sunday, Miles's mother Kendra presided over the mahogany dining table like a queen holding court, her steel-gray hair perfectly coiffed and her pearls catching the light from the crystal chandelier. The Long Island mansion had been in Miles's family for 3 generations, each room a testament to old money and older expectations. I'd sit at that oversized table, my hand instinctively moving to my growing belly, hoping someone would notice, ask questions, show excitement about the newest addition to the Garrett legacy. Instead, conversations revolved around stock portfolios, charity galas, and who was summering where. "You look tired, Eloise," Kendra observed one evening in late April, her voice carrying that particular brand of false concern that wealthy women had perfected. "Are you taking proper care of yourself?" "I'm fine," I replied, forcing a smile. "Just the usual pregnancy stuff." "Pregnancy stuff," she repeated, as if tasting something unpleasant. The way she said it made my condition sound like a temporary inconvenience rather than the creation of her first grandchild. Miles's sister Ellen leaned forward from across the table, her expression sharp with curiosity. "You know, Eloise, some women just aren't naturally suited for motherhood. It's nothing to be ashamed of. There are wonderful nannies these days." The implication hung in the air like smoke. I was 28 weeks pregnant, and my sister-in-law was already suggesting I'd need professional help to raise my own child. "I think I'll be a good mother," I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. Kendra's laugh was like ice clinking in crystal. "Darling, you can barely manage your own schedule. You've had to cancel 3 social commitments this month alone because of exhaustion. How do you expect to handle a baby's demands?" The room fell silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. Miles said nothing. He didn't defend me, didn't tell his mother to back off, didn't remind his family that fatigue was normal during pregnancy. He just cut his prime rib and chewed slowly, as if the conversation didn't concern him. I excused myself to the powder room and cried until my eyes were swollen and red. When I returned, they were discussing vacation plans for the following summer. Elaborate. European tours and Hamptons house parties that apparently wouldn't accommodate a newborn. We're thinking of renting the villa in Tuscany again, Ellen was saying. The one with the infinity pool. Of course, it's adults only, but I'm sure you two understand. Adults only. As if my daughter would be some kind of disruption to their carefully curated lifestyle. The worst part was watching Miles with other people's children. At Carlos and Camille's baby shower in May, he transformed into this amazing uncle figure. He arrived with an armload of expensive gifts, a hand-carved rocking horse from Italy, organic cotton blankets that cost more than most people's weekly salary. This is incredible, Miles, Carlos said, examining the rocking horse with genuine awe. You didn't have to do this. Are you kidding? Miles replied, his face lighting up with enthusiasm I never saw at home. This little guy deserves the best. I can't wait to teach him to play tennis at the club. I watched from across the room as Miles knelt down to Camille's level, placing his hands gently on her belly to feel the baby kick. His expression was tender, patient, completely engaged in the moment. He's going to be a heartbreaker, Miles said, grinning as the baby moved under his touch. Just like his dad. Camille beamed, her hands covering Miles's as they felt her son's movements together. We're so lucky to have you both as his godparents. Godparents. Miles had agreed to be godfather to Carlos's baby while barely acknowledging his own child's existence. Later that evening, I brought up the contrast as gently as possible. You seemed really excited about Carlos and Camille's baby today. Well, yeah, Miles replied, loosening his tie. It's a big deal. They've been trying for years. We tried for 3 years too, I reminded him. He paused, his shirt halfway unbuttoned. That's different. How is it different? It just is, Eloise. Don't make everything about you. Don't make everything about you. As if wanting my husband to show enthusiasm for our own child was somehow selfish, the nursery remained untouched well into my 3rd trimester. Our spare bedroom still looked like a showroom for expensive furniture that no one used, a cream leather chaise lounge, built-in bookshelves filled with coffee table books about architecture and wine. Miles had promised we'd start shopping for baby furniture after the Monaco conference was finalized. There's plenty of time, he'd say whenever I brought up cribs or changing tables. The conference is taking up all my mental bandwidth right now. Once Monaco is settled, we can focus on baby stuff. Monaco had become the excuse for everything. Why he couldn't attend childbirth classes. Why he couldn't help me research pediatricians. Why he couldn't even discuss potential names for our daughter. I've been thinking about Isabella, I mentioned. One evening over dinner. It was my grandmother's name. He replied, not looking up from his phone. Luis is sending the final attendee list. The Monaco thing is really coming together. Or maybe Catherine, after your grandmother? Whatever you think is best, he said absently. Oh, this is interesting. They've confirmed the yacht reception for the closing night. It's going to be incredible. Incredible. His business conference was incredible. Our daughter's name was whatever I thought was best. I started making all the decisions alone. Pediatrician interviews, hospital pre-registration, birth plan preferences, all handled during my lunch breaks or evenings while Miles worked late on Monaco preparations. The conference was still 3 months away, but it had already consumed our entire life. My own mother's reaction cut the deepest. When I called to tell her about our daughter's first kick, she sighed like I'd interrupted something important. That's nice, dear. How's Miles handling the pregnancy? He's been busy with work, I said carefully. Well, you know how men are. They don't really connect until the baby arrives. Your father was the same way. But I remembered my father being excited about my birth. I'd seen the photos of him in the delivery room, tears in his eyes as he held me for the first time. I'd heard the stories of how he'd painted my nursery himself, reading pregnancy books and talking to my mother's belly every night. Miles didn't even acknowledge that I had a belly unless someone else mentioned it first. The isolation was suffocating. I'd scroll through social media, watching other pregnant women surrounded by supportive families, elaborate baby showers, partners who seemed genuinely excited about becoming fathers. The contrast made my chest ache with a loneliness so profound. It felt like drowning, but I had no idea that the drowning had only just begun. The revelation of what genuine care looked like came in fragments, each one making Miles's indifference more glaring and deliberate. It started with Edward, the doorman at our Manhattan building, who'd worked there for 15 years and treated every resident like family. Mrs. Garrett, he called out one morning in June as I struggled with grocery bags and my unwieldy 32-week belly. Let me help you with those. Edward immediately took the bags, his weathered face creased with concern. You shouldn't be carrying heavy things like this. Where's Mr. Garrett? Business trip, I said automatically, though Miles was actually upstairs in his office, on yet another Monaco planning call with Luis. Well, that's no good, Edward said, shaking his head as he pressed the elevator button for me. My Maria was pregnant with our youngest last year, and I didn't let her carry so much as a purse. You call me next time you need groceries brought up, okay? That's what I'm here for. In the elevator, I found myself blinking back tears. Edward, who barely knew me beyond polite hallway greetings, showed more concern for my well-being than my own husband had in months. The contrast became impossible to ignore at Carlos and Camille's gender reveal party the following weekend. Their backyard was transformed into a pink and blue wonderland, with balloons and banners and a dessert table that looked like something from a magazine. But what struck me wasn't the elaborate decorations, it was watching Carlos hover around Camille like a protective guardian angel. Honey, you've been on your feet too long, he said, guiding her to a cushioned chair. Let me get you some water. Did you take your prenatal vitamin this morning? Camille laughed, but not in a way that suggested annoyance. Carlos, I'm fine. Stop fussing. I'll stop fussing when our son is 18 and moved out, he replied, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Maybe not even then. I watched Miles observe this interaction with what appeared to be amusement rather than recognition. He didn't see a model for how he should be treating me. He saw Carlos being overly dramatic about a normal biological process. When the moment came to reveal the baby's gender, Carlos had tears in his eyes as he and Camille cut into the cake together, revealing blue frosting inside. It's a boy, Carlos shouted, lifting Camille off the ground and spinning her carefully, both of them laughing and crying simultaneously. We're having a son. The entire party erupted in cheers. Carlos immediately called his parents in Mexico, speaking rapid Spanish while Camille wiped happy tears from her cheeks. Luis pulled out his phone to record a congratulations video to send to Carlos's extended family in Madrid. This calls for champagne, Miles announced, raising his glass high. To Carlos and Camille, and to baby Mendoza. I stood in that backyard, holding my own belly where our daughter kicked regularly now, watching my husband toast another couple's pregnancy with enthusiasm he'd never shown for his own. The irony was so sharp it felt like a physical pain. Later, as we helped clean up, I overheard Carlos talking to Luis about nursery preparations. I've already started painting, Carlos said, his voice bright with excitement. Camille picked this perfect shade of sage green. Very calming, she says. Good for the baby's development. And you're taking paternity leave? Luis asked. 6 weeks, minimum. Maybe more if I can swing it. These first months are so important, you know? I don't want to miss anything. 6 weeks. Carlos was planning to take 6 weeks off work to bond with his newborn son. Miles hadn't even taken 6 hours off work to attend our ultrasound appointments. The drive home was quiet until Miles finally spoke. Nice party. Carlos is really going all out for this baby thing. It's not a thing, I said quietly. It's his child. You know what I mean. The whole production. Gender reveal parties, nursery themes, paternity leave. When we were kids, fathers didn't get so involved in all the baby stuff. Your father wasn't involved? Miles shrugged. He provided for us. Made sure we had everything we needed. That's what fathers do. Provide. As if love could be measured in bank deposits and trust funds, the most painful contrast came during a dinner party at Kendra's house 2 weeks later. Ellen's friends were there with their families, and the conversation inevitably turned to children and grandchildren. I listened to these women, all from Miles's social circle, talk about their sons and sons-in-law with glowing pride. David was at every single appointment. Ellen's friend Margaret was saying about her daughter's husband. He even took notes. During the childbirth classes. Said he wanted to be the best birth partner possible. Oh, that's nothing, another woman chimed in. My son-in-law installed a special app on his phone to track contractions. He was more prepared than the doctors. The women laughed, but it was warm laughter, full of appreciation for men who stepped up during pregnancy. I glanced at Miles, who was checking his phone under the table, probably reading messages from Luis about yacht bookings and conference schedules. What about you, Eloise? Margaret asked kindly. Is Miles excited about becoming a father? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Every face turned toward me, waiting for the expected glow of marital bliss and shared excitement. He's been very focused on work lately, I managed, the diplomatic answer that revealed nothing and everything simultaneously. Kendra's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. Miles has always been ambitious. Some women find that threatening. The implication was clear. If I felt neglected, it was my own insecurity, not his neglect. If I wanted more attention during pregnancy, I was being needy rather than reasonable. That night, lying in bed while Miles worked late in his office, again, I finally understood the true scope of what I was missing. It wasn't just about missed appointments or dismissive comments. It was about the fundamental absence of partnership during the most vulnerable time of my life. Other women had men who researched cribs and argued with insurance companies about coverage. They had partners who massaged their feet and assembled baby gear with enthusiasm. They had husbands who saw pregnancy as a shared experience rather than an inconvenience to be managed around work schedules. I had Miles, who was already mentally in Monaco while I grew our daughter alone in Manhattan. The contrast was so stark it felt like living in two different realities, one where pregnancy was celebrated and supported, and another where it was tolerated at best, ignored at worst. I was about to discover which reality would define our daughter's birth. The broader circle of abandonment revealed itself slowly, like poison seeping through water. It wasn't just Miles who treated my pregnancy as an inconvenience, it was a systematic network of dismissal that extended through both our families and social circles. My own mother's reaction had been the first warning sign, but I'd convinced myself it was just her personality, her generation's approach to pregnancy. Eleanor Blackwood had always been more concerned with appearances than emotions, more focused on social standing than maternal warmth. When I called to share our 20-week ultrasound photos, her response was predictably lukewarm. "That's lovely, dear. How's Miles handling all the changes?" The changes. As if pregnancy was something that happened to him rather than me. "He's been busy with the Monaco conference preparations," I said, testing the waters of honesty. "Well, men need their work, Eloise. Don't be one of those wives who makes pregnancy all about attention-seeking. It's not attractive." Attention-seeking. Wanting my husband present for our child's major milestones was attention-seeking. "Mom, I just thought you'd want to see the ultrasound pictures." "Of course, dear. Mail them to me when you have a chance. I'm late for my bridge game." She hung up before I could mention that we were having a girl, that her first grandchild would be a daughter who might inherit her eyes or her laugh. The ultrasound photos sat on my desk for weeks before I finally put them in an envelope, wondering if she'd even open it. Ellen, Miles's sister, proved to be equally dismissive but in a more calculated way. During a lunch at her country club in July, she made her position crystal clear while picking at a Cobb salad that cost more than most people's grocery budget. "You know, Eloise, pregnancy really doesn't suit everyone," she said, her voice carrying that particular brand of cruelty that wealthy women disguised as concern. "Some women glow, and others just look tired." I was 34 weeks pregnant, swollen and uncomfortable, but I'd made an effort to dress nicely for our lunch. Apparently, it wasn't enough. "I think that's normal," I replied carefully. "Growing a human being is exhausting." Ellen's laugh was crystalline and cold. "Oh, please. Our grandmother had 6 children and never complained once. She ran a household, managed staff, hosted dinner parties right up until delivery. This modern obsession with treating pregnancy like an illness is so dramatic." The comparison stung because it was deliberately unfair. Ellen's grandmother had lived in an era of full-time domestic help and different social expectations. She'd also lived in an era when women's feelings about pregnancy weren't particularly relevant. "I'm not treating it like an illness," I said quietly. "I just think it's reasonable to expect some support from family." "Support," Ellen repeated, as if the word itself was suspicious. "What kind of support do you need that Miles isn't already providing? You have a beautiful home, financial security, excellent healthcare. What more could you possibly want? Emotional connection. Physical presence. Basic human empathy." But I couldn't say that without sounding like the dramatic, needy woman they'd already decided I was. The pattern extended to Miles's business circle as well. Luis and his wife Carmen had been friends with us for years, but when I mentioned feeling isolated during pregnancy, Carmen's response was telling. "Oh, Eloise, you're being too sensitive," she said during a couple's dinner in August. "Men handle these things differently." Luis was exactly the same during my pregnancies, completely focused on work. "It's how they show love, by providing security." But I'd watched Luis during Carmen's pregnancies. I'd seen the photos from their children's births, Luis holding newborns with tears in his eyes. I'd heard the stories of him taking time off work for every important appointment. Carmen was rewriting history to make Miles's behavior seem normal. "Did Luis miss any of your ultrasounds?" I asked directly. Carmen paused, her fork halfway to her mouth. "Well, no, but that's different. His work schedule was more flexible then." Different. Everything was always different when it came to explaining away Miles's behavior. Even my close friend from college, Jennifer, seemed to have absorbed the narrative that I was being unreasonable. When I confided in her during a phone call about feeling alone in my pregnancy, her response was disappointing but not surprising. Maybe you're putting too much pressure on Miles, she suggested. Some men just aren't comfortable with the pregnancy phase. He'll probably be amazing once the baby's actually here. But I need him to be amazing now, I said, my voice breaking slightly. I need him to care about this pregnancy, about our daughter, about what I'm going through. I know, sweetie, but maybe you need to meet him where he is instead of where you want him to be. Meet him where he is. In a place where his wife's pregnancy was an inconvenience to be endured rather than a miracle to be celebrated, the isolation became complete when even medical professionals began to notice and comment on my situation. During a routine appointment. At 36 weeks, Dr. Rodriguez finally addressed the elephant in the examination room. Eloise, I have to ask, do you have anyone who can be your birth partner? Someone reliable who can advocate for you during labor? The question caught me off guard. My husband will be there. Dr. Rodriguez's expression was carefully neutral. Will he? I've been practicing obstetrics for 20 years, and in my experience, partners who aren't present during pregnancy often struggle with the intensity of labor and delivery. What do you mean? Labor can last many hours. It requires patience, emotional support, physical assistance. It's not something you can just show up for without preparation or investment. She wasn't directly criticizing Miles, but the implication was clear. She'd seen this pattern before, and it rarely ended well for the laboring mother. Maybe you should consider having a backup person, she continued gently. A sister, a friend, your mother? Someone who's been invested in this pregnancy. From the beginning? I thought about my options. Ellen, who'd spent months undermining my confidence? My mother, who treated pregnancy like an attention-seeking phase. Carmen, who thought men showing up was optional. There was only one person who'd consistently shown genuine care and excitement about my pregnancy, my college roommate Camille, not Carlos's wife, but my friend from Northwestern who'd moved to Boston after graduation. She'd called every week to check on me, sent care packages when morning sickness was brutal, remembered every appointment date and always asked for updates. I'll think about it, I told Dr. Rodriguez, but I was already planning the phone call. That evening, while Miles worked late on final Monaco preparations, the conference was now just 6 weeks away, I called Camille. Of course I'll be your birth partner, she said without hesitation. I was hoping you'd ask. I already requested time off work just in case. Just in case. She'd been preparing to support me without even being asked, while my own husband couldn't be bothered to mark my due date on his calendar. Thank you, I whispered, tears flowing freely for the first time in weeks. I was starting to think I was crazy for wanting someone there who actually cared. You're not crazy, Eloise. You deserve to have people fighting for you, especially during something this important. For the first time in months, I felt less alone. But I had no idea that my grandmother had been fighting for me all along, from beyond the grave, in ways that would soon change everything. The contractions started at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in September, exactly 1 week before my due date. I'd been lying in bed listening to Miles's steady breathing, my hand resting on my tight belly, when the first wave hit, a deep, radiating pain that wrapped around my lower back like a steel band tightening. I lay still for several minutes, timing the sensation, wondering if this was finally it or just another false alarm. The second contraction came 18 minutes later, stronger and more insistent. By the third one, I knew our daughter had decided it was time to make her entrance. Miles, I whispered, gently shaking his shoulder. I think I'm in labor. He stirred slightly, mumbling something incoherent before rolling away from me. The digital clock on his nightstand glowed 4:23 a.m. in harsh red numbers. Miles, I said louder, another contraction building. The contractions are getting regular. We need to start timing them. He cracked one eye open, squinting at me in the darkness. Are you sure? First babies usually take forever. Can't this wait until morning? Can't this wait until morning? As if our daughter's birth was something that could be rescheduled for a more convenient time. Labor doesn't wait for convenient timing, I said, my voice strained as another wave peaked. Dr. Rodriguez said to come to the hospital when contractions are 5 minutes apart for an hour. Miles sat up slowly, running his hands through his hair. What time is it? Almost 4:30. Shit, he muttered, reaching for his phone. The screen illuminated his face as he scrolled through messages. Luis was supposed to call at 6 about the final Monaco arrangements. The conference is in 3 days, Eloise. 3 days. 3 days. Our daughter was trying to be born, and he was worried about a business conference happening on another continent. I got up and began the slow walk to the bathroom, breathing through another contraction that felt like it was trying to split me in half. When I returned, Miles was on his phone, speaking in hushed tones to someone who clearly wasn't medical personnel. Yeah, I know we were supposed to finalize the yacht catering today, he was saying. But Eloise is having some labor pains, so I might be delayed. Some labor pains. Like I had a mild headache rather than the beginning of childbirth. By 6 a.m., the contractions were coming every 7 minutes and lasting nearly a minute each. I'd called Dr. Rodriguez's after-hours line, and the nurse had confirmed that we should head to the hospital soon. I'd also called Camille, who was already packing her bag in Boston for the drive down. I'll be there in 4 hours, she promised. Maybe less if traffic cooperates. You've got this, honey. Miles, meanwhile, was in his home office having increasingly agitated phone conversations about conference logistics. Through the wall, I could hear fragments of his discussions, something about VIP transportation from the Monaco airport, last-minute changes to the welcome dinner menu, concerns about weather affecting the closing ceremony yacht party. When another strong contraction doubled me over in our hallway, I called out to him. Miles, we really need to go to the hospital now. 5 more minutes, he called back. I'm trying to sort out this disaster with the Monaco venue. The original ballroom double-booked us. 5 more minutes. Our daughter wasn't going to wait for him to resolve catering conflicts in Monaco. I started gathering my hospital bag alone, moving slowly between contractions, double-checking that I had everything Dr. Rodriguez recommended. Phone charger, comfortable going-home outfit, receiving blankets for the baby. Miles's voice carried from his office, animated and urgent as he discussed wine selections and seating arrangements for people who weren't his wife or daughter. At 7:15 a.m., I stood in the doorway of his office, hospital bag in hand, breathing through a contraction. That made me grip the doorframe for support. Miles, I'm calling a car. The contractions are 5 minutes apart. He looked up from his laptop, his expression torn between irritation and mild concern. Right now? Can't you wait until I finish this call? Luis is freaking out about the Monaco setup. Our daughter is coming whether Luis is freaking out or not. Miles sighed, the sound of a man being asked to make an unreasonable sacrifice. Fine. Let me just send this email about the transportation schedule. While he typed furiously, I called the car service myself. 20 minutes, they promised. I used the time to send a group text to our families, in labor. Heading to Presbyterian Hospital. Baby coming today. The responses came quickly, but not the ones I'd hoped for. Ellen, how exciting. At the spa today, but we'll try to stop by later. Kendra, wonderful news. Unfortunately, I'm flying to Martha's Vineyard this afternoon. But we'll visit when I return. My mother, that's nice, dear. I have book club tonight, but maybe tomorrow. Even Carlos, who'd been so excited about his own baby, sent a brief message, congrats. In Monaco for the conference prep. Give Miles my best. Monaco conference prep. Even our closest friends were prioritizing the same business event that had consumed my husband's attention for months. Miles finally emerged from his office, reluctantly putting on clothes and checking his phone one more time. I guess we should go, he said, as if we were heading to a dentist appointment rather than the birth of our first child. The car arrived, and as we drove through Manhattan's morning traffic toward the hospital, Miles spent the entire journey on speakerphone with Luis, discussing backup plans for Monaco venue problems. I sat in the back seat, breathing through contractions every 4 minutes now, listening to my husband prioritize everything except the miracle that was about to happen. Presbyterian Hospital's maternity ward smelled like disinfectant and new beginnings. I was wheeled into labor and delivery room 314 at 8:42 a.m., the contractions now coming every 3 minutes with an intensity that made my vision blur around the edges. The nurse, Patricia, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and efficient hands, immediately began setting up monitors and checking my progress. How are we doing, Mama? She asked, helping me into the hospital gown. First baby? Yes, I managed between contractions. She's coming fast. Patricia's eyes automatically scanned the room, taking inventory of who was present for support. Miles stood near the window, phone pressed to his ear, his voice low but urgent as he continued coordinating Monaco conference details. And Dad's here, I see, Patricia said diplomatically. Any other family coming? My friend Camille is driving down from Boston. She should be here in a few hours. Miles ended his call and approached the bed with obvious reluctance. How long is this going to take? I have a really important conference call at 11 with the Monaco venue coordinator. Patricia's expression remained carefully neutral, but I caught the slight tightening around her eyes. In 20 years of labor and delivery nursing, she'd probably seen every variation of unsupportive partner behavior. Labor with first babies can take anywhere from 8 to 20 hours, she said matter-of-factly. Sometimes longer. There's no way to predict exactly. 20 hours? Miles looked genuinely horrified. But I'm supposed to fly to Monaco tomorrow morning. The conference starts Thursday. Supposed to fly to Monaco. While I was in labor with his daughter. Dr. Rodriguez arrived at 9:30 for her examination, her warm presence immediately making the sterile room feel more manageable. 4 centimeters dilated, she announced after checking my progress. Baby's definitely coming today. How are you feeling, Eloise? Scared, I admitted, reaching for Miles's hand during another contraction. But ready. Miles's hand was limp in mine, distracted. His phone had been buzzing constantly with messages, and I could see him fighting the urge to check it during my contraction. The pain is normal, Dr. Rodriguez assured me. Your body knows what to do. The most important thing is having good support. She glanced meaningfully at Miles, who was already pulling his phone from his pocket as soon as my contraction ended. Luis, I need to call you back, Miles said, stepping toward the hallway. Yeah, she's in labor, but it's going to take all day apparently. She's in labor. Not my wife or, we're having our baby. Just she's in labor, like I was a stranger. Experiencing an inconvenient medical event. By 11 a.m., the contractions were overwhelming. Each wave felt like being split apart from the inside, and I found myself gripping the bed rails and making sounds I didn't know I was capable of. Miles had moved to the chair in the corner, laptop open, working on what he claimed were urgent Monaco presentations. Miles, I gasped during a particularly brutal contraction, can you help me breathe through this? He looked up briefly from his screen. You're doing fine. Just breathe like they taught us in those classes. Those classes? The childbirth preparation sessions I'd attended alone while he worked late on Monaco planning. Patricia returned to check on me, her movements gentle but her expression increasingly concerned as she observed the dynamic in the room. Honey, is there anyone else you can call? She asked quietly while adjusting my four. Someone who could provide more hands-on support? Before I could answer, my phone rang. Camille's name appeared on the screen. I'm stuck in traffic outside the city, she said when I answered. There's been an accident on I-95. I'm maybe 2 hours away still. How are you doing? It hurts, I whispered, tears starting to flow. It really hurts, and I don't think I can do this. Yes, you can, Camille said firmly. You're the strongest person I know. Is Miles helping? I glanced over at my husband, who was now on a video call with what appeared to be the entire Monaco Conference Planning Committee, discussing seating charts for the opening gala. He's here, I said carefully. Camille understood immediately. I'm going to drive as fast as I safely can. You hold on, okay? Don't let anyone make you feel like you're going through this alone. But I was going through it alone. Despite being in a room with my husband, despite being surrounded by medical professionals, I felt utterly isolated as another contraction built to its crushing peak. At 1 p.m., Dr. Rodriguez returned to find me sobbing through contractions while Miles participated in what sounded like a heated conference call about yacht reservations. 6 centimeters, she announced after her examination. We're making good progress. But Eloise, your stress levels are concerning me. Labor goes better when you feel supported and calm. She looked directly at Miles, who had finally ended his call. Dad, I need you to put the phone away now. Your wife needs your full attention. Miles shifted uncomfortably. It's just that I have this conference in Monaco, and there are some last-minute issues. There will always be last-minute issues, Dr. Rodriguez interrupted, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd seen too many fathers miss the most important moments of their lives. This is happening once. Your daughter is being born today. I know that, Miles said defensively. But I can't just abandon my professional responsibilities. Abandon his professional responsibilities. While he was literally abandoning his family responsibilities, another contraction hit, stronger than any before, and I heard myself cry out in a way that filled the room with urgency. Patricia immediately moved to my side, coaching me through the breathing, while Dr. Rodriguez monitored the baby's heartbeat. Miles, meanwhile, stepped into the hallway to take yet another call. When the contraction passed, I was left gasping and alone again, staring at the empty chair where my husband should have been, listening to his muffled voice through the door as he discussed conference logistics while I labored to bring his daughter into the world. The final hour of labor blurred together in a haze of pain so intense it felt like being turned inside out. By 3 p.m., I was fully dilated and ready to push, my body taking over with an ancient rhythm that required every ounce of strength I possessed. Dr. Rodriguez positioned herself at the foot of the bed while Patricia held one of my hands, becoming the anchor I desperately needed. Okay, Eloise, with the next contraction, I want you to push like you're having the biggest bowel movement of your life, Dr. Rodriguez instructed. Long, sustained pressure. I nodded, gathering what remained of my energy. Through the observation window, I could see Miles in the hallway, still on his phone, gesturing animatedly as he spoke. Even now, even during the moment our daughter would enter the world, He was somewhere else entirely. The contraction built like a tsunami, and I bore down with everything I had, feeling our baby move lower, closer to meeting us. Patricia wiped my forehead with a cool cloth. That's it, honey. She's coming. I can see her head. She's coming. Our daughter was almost here, and her father was discussing catering menus in a hospital hallway. Miles. I called out between contractions, my voice hoarse from hours of labor. She's coming now. He held up one finger through the window, the universal signal for, just one more minute, and continued his conversation. Dr. Rodriguez's expression hardened. Patricia, can you please get the father in here? His daughter is about to be born. Patricia left my side and returned moments later, shaking her head. He said he's on an important call about some emergency in Monaco. Something about a cancelled venue. A cancelled venue. While his daughter was being born, another contraction seized me, and this time I could feel everything changing, my body opening completely as our baby moved through the birth canal. The sensation was overwhelming, pain and pressure and the strangest feeling of completion, like a puzzle piece sliding into place. I can see her head. Dr. Rodriguez announced. Dark hair, just like Mom. One more push, Eloise. I looked toward the window where Miles still stood with his back to us, completely absorbed in his conference crisis. This was it, the moment we'd waited for, planned for, dreamed about, and he was missing it for a business meeting. The final contraction built with the force of a freight train, and I pushed with every muscle in my body, feeling our daughter slip into the world at 3:47 p.m. on September 15th. Her cry filled the room immediately, strong, healthy, indignant at being displaced from her warm home. She's here. Patricia exclaimed, tears in her eyes. She's perfect. Dr. Rodriguez placed our daughter on my chest, this tiny, slippery miracle covered in vernix and blood, her eyes squeezed shut as she announced her arrival to anyone who would listen. I looked down at her wrinkled face, her impossibly small fingers, her shock of dark hair, and felt my heart break and heal simultaneously. She was beautiful. She was healthy. She was mine, but the delivery room, which should have been filled with celebration and excited phone calls and partners crying with joy, contained only the medical staff, one exhausted mother, and the muffled sound of business negotiations through a closed door. What's her name? Patricia asked gently, helping to clean our daughter while she lay on my chest. I looked toward the hallway where Miles was still gesturing emphatically, his priorities crystal clear. Isabella. I whispered, choosing the name I'd mentioned months ago that he'd never responded to. Isabella Rose Garrett. Isabella Rose. A perfect name for a perfect baby whose father was too busy to witness her birth. Dr. Rodriguez clamped and cut the umbilical cord, officially separating Isabella from the body that had grown her for 9 months. Dad usually likes to cut the cord, she said diplomatically. Should we wait for him? No, I said firmly. Don't wait. As they cleaned Isabella and performed the standard newborn assessments, I heard the ding of the elevator down the hall. Moments later, Camille burst through the door like a hurricane, her hair wild from driving with the windows down, her eyes immediately seeking mine. Did I miss it? She gasped, rushing to my bedside. She just arrived, I said, tears streaming down my cheeks. Meet Isabella. Camille's face crumpled with emotion as she looked at our tiny daughter. Oh my God, Eloise. She's perfect. Absolutely perfect. She was the first person to truly celebrate Isabella's arrival. While Miles discussed yacht policies with strangers in Monaco, Camille took photos of those first precious moments, held my hand while I delivered the placenta, and asked all the questions that new fathers typically asked about weight and length and APGAR scores. 7 pounds, 2 ounces, Patricia announced. 20 inches long. Perfect APGAR scores. She's a healthy, beautiful baby. Finally, Miles ended his call and entered the room, his expression more relieved about resolving his business crisis than excited about meeting his daughter. He approached the bed cautiously, as if unsure of his role in this scene. So, it's over, he asked, glancing at Isabella briefly before checking his phone again. Everything went okay? It's over. As if childbirth was something to be endured rather than celebrated. Miles, I said quietly, meet your daughter. Isabella Rose. He looked down at her with the same detached interest he'd shown the ultrasound photos months ago. She's small. She's perfect, Camille said firmly, her protective instincts already activated, but even as I held our beautiful daughter, surrounded by the chaos of post-birth procedures and Camille's tears of joy, I felt a profound emptiness. Where Miles's wonder should have been, our daughter had entered the world, and her father had missed it entirely. The soft knock on my recovery room door came 3 hours after Isabella's birth, barely audible above the gentle hum of medical equipment and my daughter's occasional soft whimpers. I was lost in studying her tiny fingernails, marveling at how perfect they were, when a woman in an expensive navy suit entered with unusual hesitation. "Mrs. Garrett," she said, her voice carrying a strange formality I hadn't heard from any other hospital staff. "I'm Margaret Chen, hospital administrator. I have something for you." She held a set of keys, not the plastic hospital bracelet or medical forms I'd been expecting, but actual metal keys on an elegant silver keychain that caught the afternoon light streaming through the window. The keychain bore an intricate engraving that made my breath catch, the same rose pattern from my grandmother's jewelry box, the one that had sat on her vanity when I was a child. "I don't understand," I whispered, shifting Isabella carefully in my arms. "What are these for?" Margaret glanced at Camille, who was dozing in the uncomfortable visitor's chair after driving 4 hours and staying by my side through labor, then looked back at me with obvious curiosity. "These came from the law firm of Whitmore and Associates," she continued, pulling a sealed envelope from her leather portfolio. "The delivery instructions were very specific. I was to give these to you only if you were alone during your delivery." My heart stuttered. Alone. Someone had anticipated that I might be abandoned during childbirth. "What do you mean, alone?" I asked, though I was afraid I already knew. Margaret unfolded a crisp piece of paper from her jacket pocket. "I was given a list of names," she said carefully. "If any of these people were present and actively participating in your labor and delivery, I was instructed to hold on to this until they left." The paper trembled in my free hand as I read the names typed in neat legal font: Miles Garrett, Kendra Garrett, Ellen Morrison, Eleanor Blackwood, Carlos Mendoza, Luis Mendoza. Everyone who should have been here. Everyone who wasn't. "I don't understand who sent this," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Margaret's expression softened with professional sympathy. "The envelope should explain everything. The law firm was very clear that this was to be delivered immediately after birth, but only under these specific circumstances." Camille stirred in her chair, her eyes opening as she sensed the tension in the room. "What's going on?" "I don't know yet," I said, staring at the keys that felt warm and substantial in my palm. "Someone sent these. Someone who knew I might be alone today." The envelope was thick, expensive stationery with my grandmother's maiden name embossed in elegant script at the top: Victoria Rose Blackwood. My grandmother had died when I was 12, but her memory had always been a source of comfort during difficult times. She'd been the one person in my family who'd made me feel unconditionally loved. "Should I stay?" Margaret asked gently, "or would you prefer privacy?" "Stay," I said quickly, needing witnesses to whatever I was about to discover. "Please stay." The envelope opened easily, releasing the faint scent of the lavender sachets my grandmother had kept in all her drawers. The letter inside was in her handwriting, elegant, flowing script that I'd recognize anywhere, but the paper looked fresh. "Recent. My dearest Eloise," it began, and I had to stop reading to wipe my eyes. "If you're reading this letter, then too things have happened. You've given birth to your child, and you've been abandoned by those who should have supported you most. I wish I could say I'm surprised, but I've been watching your marriage for years, sweetheart, and I've seen the patterns." I looked up at Margaret, confused. "This doesn't make sense. My grandmother died 16 years ago." Margaret consulted her notes. The law firm indicated these instructions were left by Victoria Rose Blackwood and updated regularly through a trust mechanism. The final instructions were modified just 6 months ago. 6 months ago. Right around the time I'd announced my pregnancy to the family and begun experiencing their systematic dismissal. I continued reading, my grandmother's voice seeming to fill the sterile hospital room. "I established a trust years ago specifically to protect you if Miles and his family ever revealed their true nature. I hoped I was wrong about them, darling, but I prepared for the possibility that they would fail you when you needed them most." The keys in my palm suddenly felt heavier, more significant. "The keys you're holding are to a private jet that has been maintained and ready for your use since the day you married Miles. Hangar 7 at Teterboro Airport. The pilot, Captain James Morrison, has been on retainer for years, waiting for your call. A private jet my grandmother had bought and maintained. A private jet for 16 years, just in case I needed it. If Miles has abandoned you during childbirth, I suspect he'll try to flee rather than face the consequences of his actions. Men like him always run when confronted with their failures. The jet will ensure he can't escape accountability by hiding behind distance or international borders." Camille leaned forward, reading over my shoulder. "Eloise, is this real?" I looked at Margaret, who nodded solemnly. "The law firm confirmed all arrangements are current and valid. The aircraft is fueled and ready for immediate departure if needed." My phone buzzed with a text message from Miles. "Had to catch early flight to Monaco. Conference emergency, couldn't wait. Will call when I land." Had to catch early flight. He'd left while I was recovering from giving birth to his daughter. He'd fled to another continent rather than face the responsibility of fatherhood. My grandmother's letter continued, the jet is equipped with everything you'll need for international travel with a newborn, including medical equipment and a certified flight nurse. Captain Morrison has clearance to land at any airport worldwide and has been briefed on potential destinations where accountability tends to be more immediate. I stared at the keys, then at Isabella sleeping peacefully in my arms, then at the text message confirming my grandmother's prediction had been exactly right. Miles thought he could escape to Monaco and avoid the consequences of abandoning his family. He had no idea that his wife now held the keys to reach him anywhere in the world. Margaret excused herself to give us privacy, leaving behind a business card for the law firm and instructions to call when I was ready to discuss next steps. As soon as the door closed, I continued reading my grandmother's letter with Camille looking over my shoulder, both of us trying to process the magnitude of what was being revealed. The jet is only the beginning, my darling. I've spent 16 years building a safety net around you, hoping you'd never need it but preparing for this exact scenario. Your grandfather and I didn't build our fortune so that our only granddaughter could be mistreated by men who mistake kindness for weakness. The letter was longer than I'd initially realized, multiple pages of careful planning detailed in my grandmother's flowing script. As I turned to the second page, several official documents fell into my lap, legal papers with gold seals and corporate letterheads I didn't recognize. The Blackwood Trust has been growing steadily since your wedding day. What started as a modest safety fund has become something much more substantial. I've had excellent investment advisors, and the trust now contains assets worth approximately $12 million, Camille gasped audibly. 12 million? I continued reading, my hands shaking as the scope of my grandmother's protection became clear. The trust includes a portfolio of international properties, the villa in Tuscany where you spent that wonderful summer when you were 16, the townhouse in London near Hyde Park, and the beachfront estate in the Bahamas where your grandfather proposed to me. All deeded in your name, all maintained and ready for immediate occupancy. I remembered that summer in Tuscany when I was 16, the rolling hills covered with vineyards, the stone villa with its ancient olive trees, the sense of peace I'd felt there that I'd never experienced anywhere else. I'd assumed my grandmother had sold it years ago after my grandfather died, but the real power, sweetheart, lies in the corporate holdings. The trust owns controlling interests in several companies that Miles's business depends on, including the luxury hospitality group that Luis works for and the venue management company handling the Monaco conference he values more than his family. My breath caught. My grandmother had been playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers. If Miles abandons you during childbirth, and I suspect he will, given what I've observed of his character, you'll have the power to shut down his precious conference with a single phone call. The Monaco Marriott, the yacht rental company, the catering services, even the airport that handles private jets into Monaco, all dependent on businesses that answer to you now. I reached for my phone, pulling up the text Miles had sent about catching an early flight to Monaco. He thought he was escaping to a safe haven where he could wait out the inconvenience of my postpartum emotions. He had no idea he was flying directly into territory that I now controlled. Captain Morrison has been briefed on all major European airports and has diplomatic contacts that can expedite any necessary conversations. The flight nurse, Angela, is actually a former military medic who specialized in international medical evacuations. You and the baby will be completely safe. During travel, Camille was reading ahead, her eyes wide with disbelief. Eloise, look at this next part. The documentation packet includes power of attorney forms that activate immediately upon Miles's abandonment, giving you full control over all marital assets, business partnerships, and investment accounts. I had the best lawyers in 3 countries. Structure this to be absolutely airtight. The legal papers in my lap suddenly made sense. They weren't just random documents, but a carefully orchestrated transfer of power that had been triggered the moment Miles chose his conference over his daughter's birth. I've also taken the liberty of documenting his patterns of emotional abandonment. The private investigator I hired has been quietly recording his choices for months: missed appointments, dismissive communications, clear evidence that his neglect has been systematic rather than circumstantial. She hired a private investigator? Camille whispered. I flipped to the next page, which contained a summary of surveillance findings that made my chest tighten with validation and grief. Timestamps of every missed appointment, photos of Miles at business dinners while I sat alone at prenatal classes, even recordings of phone conversations where he complained to Luis about my drama and neediness during pregnancy. The investigators' report will be particularly useful if Miles attempts to claim parental rights later while having abandoned his responsibilities during your most vulnerable time. Family courts take a dim view of fathers who prioritize business travel over childbirth. My grandmother had thought of everything. While I'd been doubting my own perceptions and questioning whether I was being too demanding, she'd been collecting Evidence that my abandonment was real, systematic, and legally significant. The final component of your protection, darling, is the most important. You now have choices. You can go to Monaco and confront him directly, forcing him to face the consequences of his actions in front of his precious business colleagues. You can exercise your corporate authority and shut down his conference entirely. Or you can simply disappear with your daughter to any of your properties worldwide and build a new life without him. I looked down at Isabella, who was sleeping peacefully against my chest, unaware that her life had just changed completely. Her father thought he'd abandoned us to powerlessness, but my grandmother had spent 16 years ensuring the opposite. Whatever you choose, know that you are not alone, you are not powerless, and you are not dependent on people who have proven themselves unworthy of your love. You are my granddaughter, Eloise Rose, and you are stronger than they could ever imagine. The letter was signed with the same flourish I remembered from birthday cards and Christmas gifts, followed by a phone number and the words, "Call Captain Morrison when you're ready to fly." The hospital room door swung open with theatrical timing just as I was calling Captain Morrison to confirm the jet's readiness. Ellen appeared first, her designer heels clicking against the linoleum floor, carrying an enormous bouquet of white roses that probably cost more than most people's car payments. Behind her came Kendra, resplendent in a cream-colored Chanel suit, her expression carefully arranged into what she imagined looked like grandmotherly concern. "Darling," Ellen exclaimed, her voice pitched at the perfect volume to suggest deep emotion while maintaining her social polish. "We came as soon as we could. The traffic from the Hamptons was absolutely impossible." I glanced at the clock on the wall, 8:47 p.m. Isabella had been born over 5 hours ago. The birth certificate lay completed on my bedside table, with only my signature in the parent section, the father line conspicuously blank. "Traffic," I repeated flatly, my voice carrying none of the warmth they expected. The keys to the private jet felt solid and empowering in my palm, hidden beneath Isabella's receiving blanket. Kendra approached with her practiced grandmother smile, the one she'd probably been rehearsing since receiving my text about labor. "Oh, my precious granddaughter," she cooed, reaching toward Isabella with perfectly manicured hands. "Let me hold her." "No," I said simply, adjusting my hold on Isabella protectively. Both women froze, confusion flickering across their faces. In their world, new grandmothers had automatic rights to newborn babies, regardless of their behavior during pregnancy. "What do you mean, no?" Kendra asked, her voice carrying the edge of someone unaccustomed to being denied anything. "I mean no. She's sleeping, and I don't want her disturbed." Camille shifted in her chair, fully awake now and watching the interaction with the wariness of someone who'd witnessed my abandonment firsthand. She'd been here for the labor, the delivery, the first precious hours of Isabella's life. She'd earned her place in this room. They hadn't. Ellen rushed forward with her flowers, her expression desperate to reclaim some semblance of family celebration. "These are from the garden at the estate. I thought they'd brighten up this dreary room." The irony wasn't lost on me. Ellen, who'd spent months undermining my confidence about motherhood, was now trying to brighten my recovery room with flowers after missing the most important day of my life. "That's thoughtful," I said without any genuine warmth. "You can put them on the windowsill." "Where's Miles?" Kendra asked, her eyes scanning the room as if he might be hiding behind medical equipment. "Surely he's not still at the office?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. They still didn't know that their golden boy had fled to Monaco while I gave birth to his daughter. "Miles had a conference emergency," I said, watching their faces carefully. "He caught an early flight to Monaco." The silence that followed was deafening. Even Ellen, who'd mastered the art of social recovery from awkward moments, couldn't immediately respond to the revelation that Miles had abandoned his wife and newborn daughter for a business trip. "Monaco?" Kendra finally whispered, her composure cracking slightly. "Today? But surely the conference could wait." "Apparently not," I interrupted. "The yacht reservations were more urgent than meeting his daughter." Camille made a small sound of disgust from her chair, the kind of noise that spoke volumes about what she thought of Miles's priorities. Ellen attempted damage control, her voice taking on the desperate brightness of someone trying to normalize the abnormal. "Well, you know how important that conference is for his career. He's probably devastated to miss these first hours, but I'm sure he'll make it up to you both when he returns." "Make it up to us?" As if missing your child's birth was something that could be compensated for with flowers and promises. "When does he return?" Kendra asked, settling into the visitor's chair as if planning an extended stay. "I have no idea," I replied honestly. He didn't mention an end date for his emergency. The truth was beginning to sink in for them. Miles hadn't just stepped out for a quick business call, he'd fled the country rather than face the responsibility of fatherhood. Their perfect son and brother had revealed himself to be exactly what my grandmother had predicted, a man who would run when faced with real emotional demands. "This is just a misunderstanding," Ellen said, her voice higher now, more strained. "Miles would never intentionally miss something this important. There must be some explanation." "There is an explanation," I said calmly. "He chose a business conference over his daughter's birth. The explanation is that his priorities were clear." Kendra's face had gone pale beneath her carefully applied makeup. The realization that her son had abandoned his wife during childbirth was apparently penetrating even her practiced denial. "Surely there's something we can do," she said, reaching for her phone. "I could call him, explain that he needs to come home immediately." "Don't bother," I said, my voice steady and final. "He made his choice." Ellen and Kendra exchanged glances, uncertainty creeping into their expressions. They'd arrived expecting to play their roles in a traditional family celebration, proud grandmother and supportive sister-in-law arriving to welcome the newest Garrett heir. Instead, they'd walked into the aftermath of abandonment, faced with a daughter-in-law who was no longer seeking their approval or validation. "Well," Ellen said, her social training kicking in to fill the uncomfortable silence, "we're here now. That's what matters. Family comes together during important moments." Family comes together. 5 hours late, after the important moment had already passed, with excuses about traffic and spa appointments. I looked at these women who'd spent my entire pregnancy making me feel inadequate and unwanted, now desperately trying to position themselves as supportive family members. The contrast with Camille, who'd driven 4 hours and stayed by my side through labor, couldn't have been starker. "Yes," I agreed quietly, settling Isabella more securely in my arms. "Family does come together during important moments. It's interesting to see who actually shows up." The atmosphere in the room shifted dramatically when I reached for the legal documents my grandmother had left for me. Ellen and Kendra watched with growing apprehension as I carefully arranged the papers on my bedside table, keeping Isabella secure in one arm while handling what appeared to be official corporate letterheads and gold-sealed certificates. "What are those?" Kendra asked, her voice carrying the wariness of someone who'd spent her life around legal documents and recognized their significance. "Documentation," I replied simply, lifting the first page for them to see. "From the Blackwood Trust." Both women went very still. The Blackwood name carried weight in their social circles, old money, older connections, the kind of generational wealth that opened doors and wielded influence. But my grandmother had died years ago, and my grandfather's estate had supposedly been settled long before I married Miles. Camille moved closer to help me manage the papers while holding Isabella, her eyes scanning the official seals and corporate logos with growing amazement. "Eloise, should you be sharing these?" "They should know," I said calmly. "Especially since their lives are about to change significantly." Ellen's laugh was nervous, forced. "Change how? These look like old estate documents. Surely nothing that affects us directly." "The Blackwood Trust," I began, reading from the executive summary that had been prepared for exactly this moment, "holds controlling interests in Atlantic Hospitality Group, Monaco Venue Management, and Mediterranean Yacht Services." The color drained from Kendra's face. She knew those company names. Miles had mentioned them dozens of times during his Monaco conference preparations, discussing his partnerships and business relationships with what he described as key industry players. "That's impossible," Ellen whispered. "Those are major international corporations. Your grandmother was a nice woman, but she wasn't what?" I asked, my voice taking on an edge that silenced her immediately. "Wasn't brilliant enough to invest wisely? Wasn't strategic enough to build a business empire? Or wasn't rich enough to purchase controlling stakes in the companies that now employ your brother?" The silence stretched long enough for the implications to sink in. Miles's entire Monaco conference, the event he'd prioritized over his daughter's birth, was being hosted by companies that answered to me. Camille was reading ahead in the documents, her eyes widening as she discovered additional details. "Eloise, this says the trust also owns the Monaco Marriott where the conference is being held." "That's correct," I confirmed, turning to the next page. "Along with the private airfield that handles executive jets flying into Monaco." Ellen sank into the visitor's chair, her carefully composed expression crumbling as she processed what this meant. "You could shut down the entire conference." "I could," I agreed, my voice remaining perfectly calm while inside I felt a surge of power that was both terrifying and exhilarating. "In fact, I've already spoken to the hotel manager." Apparently, there were some last-minute concerns about the event insurance coverage. This was partially true. Captain Morrison had confirmed that the jet was ready and had mentioned making some preliminary calls on my behalf, though I hadn't yet decided whether to use the nuclear option of completely canceling Miles's precious conference. Kendra found her voice, though it came out strained and desperate. "Surely you wouldn't punish hundreds of business professionals because of a misunderstanding with Miles." "A misunderstanding?" The word came out sharper than I'd intended, causing Isabella to stir slightly in my arms. Your son abandoned his wife during childbirth to attend a yacht party. What part of that is misunderstood? Ellen leaned forward, her expression shifting into the calculating look she wore during charity board negotiations. What do you want? Money? A formal apology? Surely we can resolve this without destroying Miles's career. I don't want anything from you, I said, the truth of that statement feeling liberating. This isn't about negotiation or resolution. This is about consequences. Camille held up another document, her voice filled with awe. There's more. The trust has a private medical facility in Switzerland, property in 7 countries, and, oh my God, Eloise, look at this investment portfolio. The portfolio summary was staggering even to me. My grandmother had spent 16 years turning a modest inheritance into an international empire, all while maintaining the facade of being a pleasant widow who liked gardening and charity work. The total liquid assets alone, I read aloud, are valued at approximately $47 million. Kendra's phone slipped from her trembling hands, clattering against the hospital floor. Ellen made a small choking sound, as if the numbers had physically struck her. This changes everything, Ellen whispered, finally understanding that their family dynamic had shifted permanently. Miles doesn't know, does he? Miles, I said, adjusting Isabella as she began to wake up, is currently at a conference hosted by companies I control, staying at a hotel I own, planning to celebrate on a yacht that operates under my licensing agreements. When he tries to fly home, he'll discover that his access to private aviation in Europe has been complicated. The beauty of my grandmother's plan was becoming clear. Miles hadn't just fled to Monaco, he'd fled to a territory where I held all the power, surrounded himself with businesses that depended on my approval, and trapped himself in a luxury prison of his own making. You can't be serious about using this against him, Kendra said, her voice breaking slightly. He's your husband. The father of your child. He's a man who abandoned his family, I corrected gently. The father who chose not to be present for his daughter's birth. The husband who sent a text message instead of showing up for the most important day of our lives. Ellen was staring at the documents as if they might disappear if she looked away. What happens now? I smiled, feeling more peaceful than I had in months. Now we see if Miles is interested in being a father, or if he prefers to remain stranded in Monaco indefinitely. The worst revelation was yet to come. Hidden beneath the financial documents, I discovered a manila envelope sealed with red wax that bore the same rose insignia as my grandmother's other correspondence. Inside were printed screenshots and transcripts that made my hands tremble as I began to read. What is it? Camille asked, noticing my expression change from confident to devastated. Evidence, I whispered, my voice barely audible. My grandmother documented everything. The first screenshot showed a group text message. Chain between Miles, Ellen, and Kendra, dated from early in my pregnancy. The messages were timestamped and verified by the private investigator, each one a small knife wound to whatever remained of my trust in these people. Miles, she's getting way too emotional about every little doctor visit. Someone needs to reality check her before she gets completely hysterical. Ellen, pregnancy drama is so exhausting. Maybe if she faces some natural consequences, she'll toughen up before the baby comes. Kendra, your father and I managed just fine without all this hand-holding nonsense. Modern women are so fragile. I read the messages aloud, my voice growing stronger with each horrible revelation. Ellen's face went ashen, while Kendra gripped the arms of her chair so tightly her knuckles turned white. That's taken out of context, Ellen protested weakly, but her voice lacked conviction. What context makes hoping your sister-in-law toughens up by facing natural consequences acceptable? Camille demanded, her protective instincts flaring. The next series of screenshots revealed the true scope of their conspiracy. Messages from my pregnancy showed a coordinated effort to undermine my confidence and isolate me emotionally. Miles, if she can't handle pregnancy without constant support, how is she going to handle actual motherhood? Better to find out now. Ellen. Exactly. Real mothers don't need their hands held through every little milestone. Kendra, perhaps she'll realize she's not cut out for this and make the sensible choice. Make the sensible choice. They'd been hoping I'd give up on the pregnancy entirely. The conversation threads continued throughout my second trimester, documenting their systematic plan to make me feel inadequate and alone. They'd even discussed scheduling conflicts deliberately. Miles. I'll skip the next few appointments. She needs to learn independence. Ellen, good strategy. I'll be conveniently busy for her baby shower planning too. Kendra, we should all maintain some distance until she stops being so needy. You planned this, I said, looking directly at each of them. All of it. The missed appointments, the dismissive comments, the constant undermining. You strategized how to break me. Ellen's composure finally cracked completely. Eloise, those messages were just frustrations. We never meant. What did you never mean? I interrupted, my voice rising as months of suppressed pain erupted. You never meant to systematically destroy my confidence? You never meant to coordinate my emotional abandonment? You never meant to hope I'd give up on my pregnancy? The most damning evidence came next, a recorded phone conversation between Miles and Louise from 2 weeks before Isabella's birth, professionally transcribed by the investigator for Miles. I'm thinking of extending the Monaco trip. Maybe staying through the weekend after the conference. Louise, what about the baby? Isn't Eloise due around then? Miles, yeah, but first babies are always late. And honestly, I could use some space from all the pregnancy drama. Let her handle the hospital stuff, that's what doctors are for. Louise, are you sure that's wise? Carmen would murder me if I missed one of our children's births. Miles, Carmen's different. She was actually good at being pregnant. Eloise has turned this into a 9-month emotional crisis. Some distance might help her mature. The recording continued for several more minutes, with Miles describing my pregnancy as an emotional crisis and dismissing the birth of his daughter as hospital stuff that he could safely avoid. Kendra had gone completely silent, staring at the transcripts as if seeing her son clearly for the first time. Ellen was crying now, mascara streaming down her cheeks as she realized the full scope of what they'd done. There's more, I said, turning to the final section of evidence. Financial records showing Miles moving money to offshore accounts, apparently preparing for what he called post-baby financial independence, in case I became too expensive to maintain. The bank statements were devastating. While I'd been growing our daughter, Miles had been systematically hiding assets and preparing for what appeared to be an eventual divorce where he'd claim poverty and avoid alimony or child support. He was planning to leave us, I said, the words feeling surreal even as I spoke them. Not just for Monaco. Permanently. He was hoping I'd either miscarry from stress or prove myself so incompetent that he could justify abandoning us both. Camille was reading over my shoulder, her face a mask of fury. This is psychological abuse. Documented, premeditated psychological abuse. The evidence painted a picture of systematic cruelty that went far beyond simple neglect. This had been a calculated campaign to destroy my mental health during the most vulnerable time in my life, with the goal of either eliminating the pregnancy or positioning me as an unfit mother he could abandon without social consequences. You gambled on me breaking, I said, my voice steady now despite the tears streaming down my face. You bet that pregnancy would destroy me, that I'd prove myself unworthy of being a mother, that Miles could escape his responsibilities by pointing to my failures. The room fell silent except for Isabella's soft breathing and Ellen's quiet sobbing. But here's what you didn't count on, I continued, gathering the evidence with steady hands. You didn't count on my grandmother seeing through all of you. You didn't count on me being stronger than your worst expectations. And you definitely didn't count on your cruelty being documented and legally preserved. I looked at each of them in turn, these people who'd systematically tried to break me during the most important months of my life. The evidence is already in the hands of family court attorneys. Miles's parental rights are about to become very complicated. The decision to use the private jet crystallized when my phone rang at 6 a.m. the following morning. Miles's name appeared on the screen, and for a moment I considered letting it go to voicemail. But Camille, who'd stayed overnight in the hospital chair, nodded encouragingly. Answer it, she whispered. Let him dig his own grave. Eloise? Miles's voice was strained, panicked in a way I'd never heard before. What the hell is going on? The hotel just kicked me out. They're saying there's some problem with the conference authorization. Good morning, Miles, I said calmly, adjusting Isabella in my arms as she stirred for her morning feeding. How's Monaco? How's Monaco? Are you serious right now? The entire conference is falling apart. Luis can't reach his venue contacts, the yacht company cancelled our reservations, and now they're saying our corporate accounts have been frozen. Did you do something? The desperation in his voice was almost satisfying. Almost. I gave birth to your daughter yesterday, I said simply. Her name is Isabella Rose. She's healthy and beautiful, in case you were wondering. Silence stretched across the international connection. When Miles finally spoke, his voice was smaller, more uncertain. I know about the baby. I got your text. But this business crisis there is no business crisis, Miles. There's just consequences. What are you talking about? Consequences for what? I looked at Camille, who was recording the conversation on her phone per the advice Captain Morrison had given us during our midnight planning session. Everything needed to be documented now. Consequences for abandoning your wife during childbirth. For choosing a yacht party over meeting your daughter. For spending our entire pregnancy planning how to emotionally destroy me. You're being dramatic. Again, Miles said, but his voice lacked its usual conviction. I didn't abandon anyone. I had legitimate business obligations, Miles, I interrupted, my voice steady and final. I know about the group chats. I know about the recorded conversations with Luis. I know about the offshore accounts. I know about everything. The silence this time lasted nearly a full minute. When he spoke again, his voice was different, calculating, defensive, the tone of someone who'd been caught and was shifting strategies. Whatever you think you know, it's probably misunderstood. We can work this out when I get home. Just fix whatever you did to the conference arrangements. I'm not fixing anything, Miles. But I am coming to Monaco. What? You just had a baby. You can't travel internationally. I have a private jet. Medical staff on board. Isabella and I will be landing at Nice Côte d'Azur Airport in approximately 8 hours. The panic returned to his voice immediately. Eloise, that's insane. You're postpartum, you're emotional, you're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking more clearly than I have in months, I said, standing slowly and walking to the window where I could see the Manhattan skyline in the early morning light. The question is whether you want to have this conversation privately at your hotel, or publicly at the conference you chose over your family. Have what conversation? There's nothing to discuss that can't wait until I'm back in New York. Camille held up a tablet showing flight tracking information. Miles's return ticket was scheduled for Sunday, 3 days away. 3 days he'd planned to spend celebrating his successful conference while I recovered from childbirth alone. Your return ticket is for Sunday, I said. Isabella will be 3 days old by then. You were planning to miss her entire first week of life. That's not. I didn't. The conference schedule was set months ago. Months ago, you knew I was pregnant. You knew when I was due. You chose to schedule a pleasure trip during your daughter's birth week. The conversation was being recorded, documented, added to the growing pile of evidence that would reshape our marriage permanently. But more than that, it was serving as my final test of whether Miles was capable of taking responsibility for his actions. He failed spectacularly. Look, I'll cut the trip short, okay? I'll fly back tonight if it's that important to you. But you need to fix this conference situation immediately. Luis is freaking out, people are flying in from all over Europe, Miles, I said, cutting through his bargaining. I'm not calling to negotiate. I'm calling to inform you that you have 2 choices. You can meet me at your hotel in Monaco to discuss the terms of our future relationship, or you can explain to a family court judge why you abandoned your newborn daughter for a yacht party. Camille was grinning now, giving me thumbs up as I found my voice in a way I never had before. Terms? What terms? Eloise, you're scaring me. This isn't like you. You're right, I agreed. The old me would have accepted your excuses, blamed myself for expecting too much, waited quietly for you to decide when your family was worth your attention. This version of me owns the companies that control your conference, has legal documentation of your systematic emotional abuse, and holds all the financial power you thought you were hiding. The line went quiet except for the sound of Miles's ragged breathing. I'll be in Monaco by evening, I continued. Room 1247 at the Marriott. We'll discuss how you plan to earn the right to know your daughter. I hung up before he could respond, feeling lighter than I had since the pregnancy began. The flight to Monaco in my grandmother's private jet was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Captain Morrison, a distinguished man in his 60s with silver hair and kind eyes, greeted us at Teterboro Airport with the reverence of someone who'd been waiting years for this moment. Mrs. Garrett, he said, his voice warm with emotion, Mrs. Blackwood would have been so proud to see you using her gift. She always said you had her strength, even when you didn't know it yourself. The aircraft was a Gulfstream G650, its interior designed with cream leather and mahogany accents that somehow managed to feel both luxurious and comforting. But what took my breath away was how thoroughly prepared it was for Isabella and me. A complete mobile nursery had been installed, with a specialized infant seat approved for aviation, a changing station, and enough supplies for weeks of travel. Angela, the flight nurse, was a former military medic who radiated competence and calm. She examined both Isabella and me before takeoff, monitoring my post-delivery recovery and ensuring the baby was stable for international travel. Your grandmother thought of everything, Angela said, adjusting Isabella's tiny flight suit, custom-made with rose embroidery that matched the family insignia. She had me updated on pregnancy medical protocols every year, just in case this day came. During the 8-hour flight, Camille and I processed everything that had happened in the past 24 hours. The evidence of systematic emotional abuse, the revelation of financial power, the complete shift in family dynamics. It felt surreal, like living inside someone else's life. Are you sure about confronting him in Monaco? Camille asked as we flew over the Atlantic. You could just stay at one of your properties and let the lawyers handle everything. I looked down at Isabella, who was sleeping peacefully in the specialized bassinet, completely unaware that her life was being shaped by decisions made at 40,000 feet. He needs to see her, I said finally. He needs to understand what he chose to miss. Not through photos or videos, but in person. He needs to look at his daughter and explain why a yacht party was more important than her birth. My phone had been buzzing constantly with increasingly desperate messages from Miles. Luis had apparently been fired from his position when the yacht company discovered their event insurance had been mysteriously cancelled. The conference attendees were stranded at various Monaco hotels, unable to access their reserved venues or transportation. Ellen had called 6 times, leaving voicemails that progressed from confused to panicked to outright begging. Kendra had sent a formal letter through her attorney, requesting a meeting to discuss family matters in a civilized manner. But the most telling communication came from Miles himself, a series of texts that revealed his true priorities. Even in crisis, please fix this. My career is being destroyed. Luis is threatening to sue. The whole industry is watching. I'll do whatever you want, just restore the conference arrangements. People are calling me irresponsible. This is humiliating. Not once did he mention Isabella. Not once did he ask about her health, her weight, whether she was feeding well. Even facing the collapse of his professional reputation, his daughter remained an afterthought. As we approached French airspace, Captain Morrison announced our descent into Nice. Through the window, I could see the glittering Mediterranean coastline, the luxury yachts dotting the harbor, the playground of the wealthy where Miles thought he could hide from consequences. Whatever happens down there, Camille said, squeezing my hand, remember that you hold all the power now. He needs you. You don't need him. I nodded, settling Isabella into her carrier for landing, preparing to walk into Monaco not as the abandoned wife who'd been left to labor alone, but as the woman who controlled every business, every venue, every escape route my husband had counted on. The reckoning was about to begin. The Monaco Marriott's presidential suite overlooked the harbor where dozens of luxury yachts bobbed in the Mediterranean evening light. I stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, Isabella content in my arms, watching the conference attendees milling around the poolside bar below, business executives who had no idea their event was being controlled by the woman they'd never bothered to meet. Miles arrived at precisely 7 p.m., using the keycard I'd authorized for him. He looked haggard, his usually perfect appearance disheveled from a day spent trying to salvage his crumbling conference. His eyes immediately found Isabella, and for a moment, something flickered across his face, surprise, maybe even wonder, as he saw his daughter for the first time. She's so small, he said quietly, approaching cautiously as if I might disappear. 7 pounds, 2 ounces, I replied, not moving from the window. 20 inches long. Born at 3:47 p.m. yesterday while you were discussing catering menus. He had the grace to look ashamed, his shoulders sagging with what might have been genuine remorse. Eloise, I know I messed up. You didn't mess up, Miles. You made deliberate choices. There's a difference. He moved closer, his eyes fixed on Isabella's face. She was awake now, staring up at him with the unfocused curiosity of a newborn meeting a stranger. Can I hold her? I studied his face, looking for any sign of the man I'd once loved, the man I'd hoped would become an amazing father. Do you want to hold her because she's your daughter, or because you think it will help you negotiate? The question caught him off guard. He opened his mouth to give what I was sure would be the right answer, then closed it again, apparently realizing that anything he said would sound calculated. I don't know, he admitted finally. I don't know how to separate what I want from what I think I should want. It was the most honest thing he'd said to me in months. I walked to the suite sitting area and carefully placed Isabella in her carrier, then turned to face my husband fully. The conference is permanently cancelled, Miles. Your business partnerships are terminated. Your access to the Monaco venues, the yacht services, even the airport, all revoked. His face went white. Permanently? Eloise, you can't destroy my entire career over one mistake. One mistake. I pulled out my phone and played the recording of his conversation with Luis, his voice filling the room as he dismissed our daughter's birth as hospital stuff and described my pregnancy as an emotional crisis. Miles sank into a chair as he listened to his own words, his expression shifting from defensive to horrified to devastated. You have 2 choices, I continued when the recording ended. You can return to New York, where Ellen and Kendra are currently explaining to your social circle why their son and brother abandoned his newborn daughter for a yacht party. You can attempt to rebuild your career with the knowledge that I control most of the luxury hospitality industry you depend on. Or, you can earn the right to know your daughter. Starting from the bottom. No assumptions about your role, no expectations of automatic access, no presumption that DNA equals fatherhood. Miles looked at Isabella, then at me, his face a map of defeat and desperate hope. What would earning it look like? I smiled, feeling the weight of my grandmother's protection and my own newfound strength. We'll start with an apology. A real one. Then we'll see if you're capable of putting your daughter before your conference schedule. Outside, the Mediterranean sun set over Monaco, casting golden light across a harbor where Miles had thought he could escape accountability. Instead, he'd found himself exactly where I needed him to be, powerless, humbled, and finally ready to face the consequences of abandoning his family. The game was over. And for the first time in our marriage, I had won. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any upload from us.